Hi guys, I'm Lisa. Welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about some of the good reasons that we need to have a therapist on our side during this process. Even if you don't have a pre-existing mental health condition like I did, there are still a lot of practical things that a therapist can do for you that you may not have considered. So today I wanted to talk about a few of those things. Of course, the most important reason to have a therapist is to help us look after our mental health. My therapist helped me recognize a lot of NASA's manipulations, and he gave me some simple coping strategies to help me keep my head so I didn't get jerked around by every fleeting emotion. I think all of us could use that kind of help. If nothing else, it's nice to have somebody waiting in your corner just in case you need them. Even if you're not mentally ill when you start this process, you may be before it's over. Seriously, discrimination is a huge trauma. It harms us. That's why we get awarded damages as compensation for that harm. 2, learning to speak up for ourselves. In the beginning, I think a lot of us doubt our own perceptions about the discrimination. And of course, our employers stoke those doubts, because the more we doubt ourselves, the less likely we are to speak up about what they're doing. When I started taking my complaints up the chain of command, of course, they blamed me. I was too sensitive, reading too much into things. I was out for a quick payout. I think the reason they told me that stuff was so that I would doubt myself and not speak up for myself. In the realm of personal relationships, we call that gaslighting. I think a lot of our employers' pretext qualifies as gaslighting as well, only it's designed not to just make us doubt ourselves, but to make everybody else doubt us too. As this process drags out and they spin more and more pretext, it gets harder and harder to see the truth. Whenever I started losing sight of the truth, my therapist was there to remind me and to give me the courage to stand up for myself. And another, more practical way that he encouraged me to stand up for myself was during my investigation, when I started reading all NASA's witness statements and I was asked to rebut them. They were full of contradictions and some straight-up lies. And of course, I wanted to call out every single one of those. But I was reluctant to do it because I didn't want to appear too difficult. So I took their statements to my therapist with me, and I asked if he would help me read through them and figure out how to rebut them. And before we'd even gotten halfway through the first one, I figured out that it was pretty much okay for me to say whatever I wanted to. Me speaking the truth plainly wasn't me being difficult. It was me standing up for myself and using my voice. 3, recognizing the harm. When I started fighting, I was fighting for reasonable accommodation. I wasn't fighting so I could get a big wad of money from NASA years later, but that's what I ended up getting. And I got that money not just because NASA violated the law, but because they harmed me in the process, and I could prove it. In the beginning, I didn't think I'd really been harmed in any kind of meaningful way. I mean, sure, I was humiliated at having to sit at work in a state of poor hygiene, but I'd convinced myself it wasn't that bad, because at least I hadn't been fired. But in time, the EEOC process forced me to put a dollar value to my harm. I talked to my therapist about it, and thankfully he saw a lot of ways that I was harmed that I couldn't see myself yet. And I'm not sure I ever would have seen any of it without him. 4, corroborating your story. A lot of discrimination cases come down to we say, they say. Having corroboration from a third party, like a licensed therapist, can make all the difference between winning and losing. Our therapists rely on us to tell them what happened. Now, I tried to be as honest as I could with mine because I really needed his help, but I could only tell him my side of what happened. And as a point of fact, I could have told him anything. He had no way of knowing whether anything I was telling him was true. That means they can't really speak to the facts of the case, but they can repeat what you told them, when you told them, and give some observations about how you were behaving at the time you told them, all of which can corroborate and lend credibility to your testimony. 5, documenting the harm. Damage awards, especially for non-pecuniary harm, are fairly subjective. Most employers will at least try to make the case that whatever they did didn't cause you any significant harm. If there was any lingering doubt that Doug and I exaggerated the harm that NASA did to me, my therapist letters put that to bed. For instance, he talked about this one time when my boss made me sit in her office while she yelled at me nonstop, and how after that happened, I started having panic attacks. Details like that made it really hard for NASA to argue that they hadn't harmed me. So there it is, 5 good reasons to have a therapist at your side as you go through the EEOC process. There's probably some I'm leaving out, so if you know of any, drop them in the comments so I can put them in future videos. Meanwhile, that's it for today, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Till then, take care and hang in. Fight smart.